Now that we're done drawing the picture we call in a room, we're ready to paint it. For the paint, you'll need a brush, a bucket of water, and a paint set. The brush, if you have one that is a little bit thicker, that can be useful for spreading the paint out a bit. One that is not so narrow like this one would be fine too. If it were more of a rounded brush, that's okay. Decide what colors you want to use. Get the color wet, and then make sure your brush is wet, get the color wet, and then begin painting. Now, when you first start painting, you're going to be painting and noticing that the paint fades out of your brush. And this is a common thing that always happens with watercolor. It starts out nice and bright, and then as you're working it, it starts fading out a bit. We're going to use this to our advantage because we want the color to fade out as it gets further away from our point of view. Now, right now, our point of view, the thing that is closest to us are the parts of the wall and the ceiling that is up high on the paper. But as it gets further away, it gets lighter and lighter. And in this case, I might add a little bit of extra water to my paper so that as I'm painting, the watercolor is fading out because there's so much water in there that it's not staying in one place. It's kind of spreading out. And so the paint will spread out a little bit too. And as this dries, you'll be seeing a difference because right here, and there's some speckly areas, these are areas where the paper got really wet. And as the paper dries out, you'll see that the brightest yellow is up here at the top and the faded out yellow is down here at the bottom. And if you want to, you can even make sure that you get that contrast by adding extra yellow with very little water in it to the top part. And that's how you do a blended area. Now, when you're doing a painting, you want to assign different colors to different areas. So I don't want my walls to be exactly the same color as my ceiling. And so you can see I'm adding orange for this wall. And as I paint, the paint fades, gets lighter and lighter. And then I reload my brush, make it nice and bright in the area that's closest to me. And then as I go further away, it begins fading out. So I might need to add water to my brush, but not paint this time, and just find out what happens as I do that. And as much as possible, kind of try and get that paint to fade out. Okay, so there you can see I've done a reasonably good job of getting the wall finished up. And now I would start working on the other parts of the picture and continuing doing the painting. The person who bought this house, they decided that all of their walls would be different colors, I guess. So now we've got the red going on. And you can see the red is fading out really quickly, so I'm going to add more red to this bottom part. And you may notice also that as I'm painting, I'm kind of doing this square approach where I have the darkest parts on the outside of the paper, and then as we get further away from the outside of the paper, we see that the fade is occurring. And so it's really dark on the outside, and then as we get further in, it gets much lighter. And that's intentional, and that's what you're supposed to be doing, so that you increase the sense of depth in your picture by creating a situation where it fades. Because whenever we take a photograph, we can see that fade happening in the photograph. We might not notice it right away, but if we really analyze that photograph, we're going to notice that things that are further away appear slightly lighter. And so in art, what we do is we increase that phenomenon in our picture. We try to make that more obvious, easier to see. So now I'm doing the floor. Decided to do the floor in red, blue instead of red or orange. And I'm having to be pretty careful going in between all of these little pieces. And trying to spread that paint out so that it doesn't necessarily get real dark in any one spot. So you see me jumping around to other places where I felt like it got a little bit lighter. Sometimes I got to reload my brush with some water. And I just continue painting until I feel like I'm creating that nice blended look. And again, now that I'm going closer to the back of the room, I'm allowing that paint to fade out on me. And since it faded out, I just went all the way across with it. Now I'm going to have a little bit of trouble here because I need to create this fade out effect. So I have to be real careful about the amount of paint I put on my brush. And I might need to dip my brush to get less bright paint on it, and then let it fade out. And maybe that works and maybe it doesn't. Maybe I need to get the wetness off my brush and pull up some of the wetness off my paper where it looks like there was extra pool of paint. So sometimes you kind of have to work it back and forth. Whoops, the brush is falling apart. What I was trying to do is get some water off of there so I could pull some of it off of over here. Now I don't want to work this space too much because it'll get kind of rough looking, and as the paper gets wet it might start balling up and coming off of the surface of the page. But this is the general idea. You want to go around, make sure that there's dark areas at the edges of your painting and then lighter areas near the back wall of your painting. And then of course everything else can get painted in and made to look good and finished. You may have noticed that that red bit on the door was looking real good, so I'm going to kind of do the same thing on the window, on this wall part of the window. Okay, so keep going, finish the whole thing, and enjoy yourself.